Hey friends, what's up? It's Miss A, and this week for Northeast Branch Library Family Night, we will be making clay pumpkins. So if you get a go pack at Northeast Branch Library, while supplies last, it'll have everything you need to make this craft. If not, you'll need some air dry clay, some tin foil, a paintbrush, some paints. We are going to be using orange, dark orange or brown, green, and black, and some Mod Podge, sort of like a glossy finishing coat. So let's get started. Our first step, and I will say right from the jump actually, this is a multi-day project. So on one day, we are going to be shaping the tin foil and putting on the clay. Then we're going to have to let it dry overnight or for 2 days and then paint it. So multi-day project. But now, day one. It involves tin foil. Okay, so our first step is we are going to be taking our tinfoil ball and we're going to be shaping it to the base of our pumpkin. So basically how this works is our tinfoil acts as a base inside of our air dry clay. So if you've done our air dry clay pots before, you know it takes a while to dry. If we had thick clay for the whole body of our pumpkin, it would take ages to dry, and also it would be quite heavy. The tin foil acts as a support in the inside so we can get the shape we want with a faster drying time and make it much lighter. So you'll see I put all the tin foil as a sort of lightly scrunched together ball. You can tighten it so that it is around the size of the pumpkin you want, and the closer you can get to the shape of the pumpkin you want, the less work you'll have to do in the clay stage. So I'm going to shape my tin foil now. All right, so here's my shape. As you can see, it's not a complete ball because a pumpkin's not a total ball. I want mine to be able to sit on the table, so I flattened it so it's nice and flat on the bottom. It'll sit flat. And I added some sort of ridges, I'm not sure if you can tell, because a pumpkin is shaped sort of like, it almost looks like a bunch of slices of melon stuck together. So I want to go for that look in my pumpkin, but you can shape yours however you want. You could leave it big. You can make it more skinny and tall, wide and short, whatever you want. And if you want to make it bigger than what I've given you in the bag, just add more tin foil. So after we have our tin foil ball, we're going to be adding our clay. So I've told you this before in previous videos, but here is my best practices tip again. When you're using air dry clay, the air will dry it out. And so I like to take out just a small amount of clay at a time, not the whole ball, and then seal this back up. You don't have to do it, but I will say your clay will be easier to work with and it won't have so many little cracks because as long as this is open, out in the open here, vulnerable, it'll be drying. If it's in the bag, airtight, it'll stay moist. But anyway, what we're going to be doing is applying clay to the outside of the shape. So you want to make sure to cover all of the tin foil because that will make sure the clay sticks to each other. Otherwise it might crumble off. Also, you just don't want the tin foil showing through, you know. But we will be covering it, adding a little more so we have more of a pumpkin look, and adding a little cylinder, a little snake shape for a stem. Really, you can do it however you'd like, but that is the basic technique, and I'm going to do it with you right now. So I tear off a little bit at a time. You can do this however you want, but I like to roll it out a little bit and flatten it. And I'm basically going to start by just covering all of the tin foil in a nice thin layer. Now, one thing you can do if it's not sticking to the tin foil very well is you can always cover it with a layer of masking tape, and that will help it adhere a little bit better. But this should work fine too. So as you can see, my ball is totally covered here, but there are fingerprints everywhere, and it's also just not looking very pumpkin-y. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll some little snakes and put them on my pumpkin, like you'd have sort of those melon-shaped sections, like I said. Add those in, and then I'm going to smooth them with my finger so that it looks nice and smooth. Make sure you keep some aside for a stem. So you can see I added the snake. I smushed it a little bit, then I flattened it, and then I'm smushing it on the other side to add it in. And I'm going to do that for all of them. So you make the snake. I'm going to make that a little longer. Put it towards the top. Wrap it to where you want on the bottom. You can see it's out of there. Now I'm going to smush this to the side. You can see right there, I'm just taking my finger and making sure I eliminate all that space. I'm mushing everything into each other so it dries together. And then I'm going to flatten it. So you just press your finger on top to make those coils get a flatter shape. And then do the smush on the other side. And then I'm going to do that for all the other sides so I get the shape that I want. And like I said, your pumpkin can look however you'd like. This is just how I'm making mine. Once you have on all the coils that you want to go over and smooth them all out. And you can do that either with your finger or with the end of a paintbrush or a spoon, anything that will make it nice and smooth. And don't worry about it getting too perfect. If you want, if you or a parent or an adult has sandpaper at home you can always use that after it dries before painting if you want to sand off any bits that you think could look a little more smooth. Okay, so I have the shape I want. So now all I've got to do until it's time to dry is add a stem. So you add a stem, you could add a stem and vines and leaf. Or if you really don't want a stem, you don't have to add one. Just think of the book Stumpkin. That's a great book, and he had no stem at all. So I like to just roll a little snake, and I like to poke it at the end to make it a little fun shape at the top. And if you think of it, you could score, scratch both sides and add some wet clay in between. But air dry clay tends to be a tiny bit more forgiving since it doesn't have to go in the kiln. But I do recommend scoring and slipping if you are nervous that this will fall off when it dries. I didn't do it. We'll see if it's a mistake later. But I've added my cute little stem. And you know what? I think I'll add a little leaf too. I'm not going to add a vine, but I'll add a leaf. So I think I'm going to roll a ball and flatten it with my hands, and then I'm just going to pinch it into the shape of a leaf. Pumpkin leaves tend to be sort of pointy on the ends and sort of have a shape that goes almost V-like at the top, sort of like this. Looks a little thick, so maybe I'll pull off some of this clay, make it a little thinner, and do it again. So this is my sad little pumpkin leaf, and I'm just going to give it a few little scratches, some scoring, You can do this with a toothpick. Score where I want to add it. And I'm just going to add it right on. And we'll see tomorrow if it stayed on or not. I think it should be okay. And here is my little pumpkin. If yours is done too, it is time to let our pumpkins rest either overnight or for 2 or even 3 days if you added a whole lot of clay. Once it looks a little lighter in color and you can feel it doesn't feel sticky, it'll be time to paint, and then you'll watch the next part of the video and see how we'll make this into a cute little jack-o'-lantern. Okay, so it's day 2 now, friends. So you can see it's gotten a little lighter, but not quite light enough. This is actually not totally dry. I wouldn't recommend to you painting it quite yet. I'd wait another day or 2, but for the sake of time at the library, I'm going to be painting mine now. So our next step is to paint our pumpkins or jack-o'-lanterns. So I recommend for the first step being paint your jack-o'-lantern face. And that is just so instead of putting down all of our orange, in which case we'll use a lot of orange paint, if you do your face first, you don't have to paint that orange and you'll save some paint. So I'm going to add my jack-o'-lantern face first. Gotta pick a side to draw it on. I recommend perhaps picking the side that is the flattest. Alright, so perhaps it's not the best pumpkin face that's ever been drawn, but here is my little jack-o'-lantern face. I have 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth. All the essentials. And now I'm going to paint my stem. I'm going to paint it green. But first, what I recommend is wipe off your brush either under some water with a paper towel or both. When you wipe off your brush, you're just minimizing the color mixing. Now I'm going to, I'm going to add my green. And there is still a little black in there, but I think it looks kind of cool. Okay, and once our green paint is done, we're going to let that and the black paint dry before we paint the orange. All right, so once our orange and black paints are dry, it's time to make this fella orange. All right, so as you can see, this is nice and dry. So one more step before glue. We're going to be using this dark brown color, the one right next to the orange. And you can use that to add different details. So I'm going to go in between the different bumps and add lines, but you can do whatever you want. All right. So I just applied some of this Mod Podge, which for you will come in 2 of these. So if you see 2 of these with sort of a translucent material in it, that's a Mod Podge. It's like a glue top coat. So I brushed it all over to make it shiny, let it dry, and here is my finished pumpkin. All right, friends. So I hope you like your little pumpkins. Feel free to post on Instagram and tag us at RPL Northeast if you made a little pumpkin and you want to show us. And otherwise, I'll see you next Wednesday for another family night craft. Bye, friends.